everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna give just a couple seconds to get people in. Hey, Jonathan, how's it going?
Hey Molly, not too bad. How about you?
Doing good. Thanks for joining today. We'll give everyone just a couple minutes to get in here. Make sure we've got all things squared away for those joining directly in app. Chat box is on the right. Those of you on LinkedIn, make sure to use the chat within LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that we bring those questions in here. As always, love keeping these interactive. Right, as fun as it is for Jonathan and I to connect and chat and talk through things, we want to make sure this is valuable for our audience. So the more you guys can share and the questions you can ask, we're getting out of it what we put into it. So with that, Jonathan, thanks for joining WTF as RevOps. I'm really excited to talk to you. The tagline we had on here is like how to scale your startup from 1 million to 10 million with RevOps. And I've spent a lot of time like joking over the years. We went from like founder-led sales and now we have like founder-led RevOps. So I'm
Right.
I'm really excited. I'm going to be really excited to get your take on that, and just talk through that. Especially taking the perspective of like a founder and what you should care about, but also how you bring and build this in. So I'd love if you can give a background to the team, share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Jonathan, and I'm the dad of a legendary prodigy. Her name is Zariah Rose, and I am her proud single gay dad. So I always like to preface by that because I think visibility is important within this space. I've been in revenue growth at one capacity or another for about 15 years. I started doing growth before I actually knew what it was in a different industry. And I became known as the marketing guy when I wasn't doing marketing. So I was like, maybe I should do that. And then several years later, I really stepped into purpose. And then I started to build Successment. And Successment focuses on diversely led B2B startups at or around $1 million or so. And we scale them to $10 million ARR, and that's where we like to play. And the reason that we do it is because we believe that technology and building economic visibility and growth from technology is a great multiplier and a great way to influence ideas and concepts and economies. And I want to do it for more people that look like me. So we leveraged RevOps as a concept, and it spun off into our intellectual property, which we call RevOps Science. So I'm really excited to explain to you and kind of give some light in terms of how you can use RevOps and the data there to really put revenue in motion.
I love that. You're bringing me back when I was at FunnelWise, wrote a book called Revenue Funnel Science, right? And I love the concept of like why science is so important in this. And like we talk about art, but like talking about the science as well. So thanks so much for being here today. And I'm excited to dig into things and start to have the concept. I laugh anytime somebody says like I was doing a role and they thought I was this thing, but like really I was doing this, right? And like that's I kind of how I felt for the vast majority of my career. It's like I've always really been doing revenue operations, or in your case you were doing revenue growth components, and it's like but it got bucketed into this like, oh yeah, you're the marketing leader, but you're also the problem solver, right? And the
Mhm.
fixer, and like the strategic person and all of those things. And now it's
And
like,
the,
oh,
and the
we have a
many
home.
other hats that you have to wear, right?
Right. Right. So let's, one of the things that I always like to start the conversation with, hence the title, right? Like in your words, like WTF is RevOps, right? Like when you hear RevOps, revenue growth, like how do you define it? What does that look like to you? What's that, warm and fuzzy kind of feeling that you share with clients?
Sure. So I love RevOps because true to marketing and revenue growth in general, we always do a lot of PR for what we do. We always try to protect what we do and make it valuable. So
Yeah.
Uh, I'm fairly confident that RevOps is a concept that's been around for a really long time. It's just been called a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
RevOps is the cool new way to frame it. And at the highest level, I think of RevOps, like hardcore RevOps, as two things. I think of it as an IT function that is designed to develop really good data that can unlock insights for revenue growth. And I
Yep.
also think about it as a methodology of leveraging that data, because the way that I use RevOps data is to generate more revenue. But that same RevOps data can inform product, and it can inform customer success, and it can inform the C, it can inform a lot of different things. Data is very subjective. So I think that RevOps is the very popular concept of aligning different silos within a startup or, a larger organization in the direction of revenue. But now we have a cool name. Now it's RevOps, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think to your point, right? It's the same thing we've always like been doing, right? We didn't wake up one day and say, "Man, we should sell more," right? Like let's do that and build this great team that's going to help us sell more, right? I think as businesses get more purposeful, right, and as there is more data and there is more technology, we realize like the silos around this create duplication, create friction. And like if you have friction within your internal business processes and your internal technology, like you're only creating friction for your customers.
That's right.
And so, to your point, I love how you broke it down into the two pieces, right? There's the tech, the tooling, the data, and then there's this methodology of like, how do we use this? How do we do better? How do we improve? How do we drive the experience? So, really, really into this, right? Like we're speaking the same language, and I think that's the one thing that I do love about kind of this community, right? Is like as I bring on revenue operations, revenue leaders, like we're generally talking the same way and talking about the same things and have different experiences but similar like purposes, which I think is so cool. As you work with these startup companies and coming in here, I'm going to just say talk to me about founder-led RevOps. Like I'm going to coin that term because I just think that it's like hilarious and still like makes me laugh. So
when I think about founder-led RevOps, because of the size startups that I work with, I think, what a mess. Like WTF, right?
yeah.
I think that RevOps, just like marketing, just like revenue growth and all of whatever the buzzwords are, it's like, let's grow this thing. I think that
Yep.
people have different ways of approaching it. They assign a different terminology and they go about it in really, really different ways. And so when I think founder-led RevOps or I think founder-led growth, I think about an extremely passionate, product-driven, focused inventor that is really obsessed with growing his business. And he says, RevOps to me means sales, and marketing needs to drive sales, and I need leads, and that's the metric. And then sales is close business. So go do it. And it's just like, whoa, let's take a pause real quick, because there is a wealth of information within your within your organization that you're not leveraging. And when I draw the picture for them, the way that we do it at Successment, we always map data, outcomes, OKRs, KPIs to 5 buyer stages. And then it's like, oh, okay, they lean in and they see that it makes sense. And I'm like, at each buyer stage, there's going to be a different functional leader within your startup that's in charge of success there. And the 5 buyer stages that we typically look at are going to be like the awareness stage, engagement, and then we're going to talk about enablement, land, and expand. How can all of that be sales driven and sales led, Mr. or Mrs. Founder? And then they're like, oh,
or how can it be founder, owned, right? Especially like when you're like, you gotta give it up, right? Like you're building a business, which means you've got to hire the plumber, you got to bring in the carpenter,
that's right.
You can continue to be the foreman, but you can't be the handyman too.
That's right. And then usually the way that I'm able to engage founders is by explaining to them my difference between what a founder is and what a CEO is, right? And my goal is if I'm going to upscale your business by leading your revenue growth from $1 million to 10 million, I'll be damned if you're still a founder at 10 million. At 10 million, you need to be a CEO and be above the business and focus on all around direction and deploy your data and resources correctly in order to grow. After I throw you in the truck, once you're at 10 million, I don't want to play with you no more. You're not struggling. You're not a little guy. I'm not that invested. Maybe I'll help you if I like it. But when you separate it in that way, they start to see. And then with the way that we build the revenue growth formula, which is the way that we use data and growth at Successment, when you divide it based on buyer stage and you kind of identify the functional leads of each buyer stage, then the picture becomes very, very clear. Oh, wait, there is a lot of data in product usage that I can actually use
Yeah.
to power up awareness all the way at the beginning of that journey. Now, Jonathan, how do you tie that to revenue? I'm like, okay, let's think about it. You're thinking about revenue and RevOps in a way where you're like, okay, I need sales, 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 sales. And I got to do the sales because nobody understands my baby. I'm the sales leader. I got to do the sales.
I'm
And
the
it's
only
just
one
like,
who can sell like me.
I'm the only one. Nobody knows it like me. I'm creating a category. This is a revolution that my tech is starting. And I'm like, okay, I'm so glad that you feel that way. Data doesn't have feelings and it's not going to agree with you. Let's go.
Right.
Let's use data to move in the direction of revenue. And usually the first light bulb that goes off is let me ask you a question, Mr. and Mrs. Founder. You want growth and you want data to tell you how to get growth from within your organization, but you're already saying the tactic that you want to do, which is we need more sales, SDR, and it's
Yep.
like, okay, let's look at the entire organization, right? What if I told you that the right way to use your growth investment is actually expanding your current customer base instead of going to market for net new customers?
Right.
The light bulb. Whoa! How are we going to do that? And I'm like, well, it's not going to be in the sales and marketing data. It's actually going to be in the customer success and product data. That's RevOps, baby. You
Yep.
got to move this way, right? So we take a look at the product teams, which are typically behind the scenes IT people, and we
Yeah.
really make them champions. And we say, tell us how people are using the app or the SaaS or the managed service, whatever the thing is. How are people
Yeah.
using? What
Yeah.
problem are we really solving? And do the customers realize
Or
that,
how
or when
or how are they not using it, right? You flip that
right,
inverse too, right? And
exactly,
it's like,
exactly,
and like that's the thing that, like, it's like data, and I laugh, right? Because we have a lot of conversations about data, and I love that you said, like, I can't remember, you said a word after data. Data is something, and I can't remember what it was, but that's where I'm at today. But it's it's black and white. Data is data, and I always joke, like, well, I don't joke. I actually probably get more frustrated than anything when people are like, my data's crap, my data's garbage, my data's this. I'm like, no, your processes, right? Data
yeah,
is an output of process, right?
that's right.
Data is like, data's not wrong. How you
Yeah,
use
no,
it, how you interpret it can be wrong. But if I tell it's, people process data technology, right? If I tell my process, I build my process, this is my process, data is the byproduct of that. And
that's
then
right.
what you're telling your tools to do is capturing it. So it's like, you can't, I'm on the hill I will die on, Jonathan, is like, you can't critique your data. Your data's not
No,
wrong.
yeah, because data doesn't have feelings, and I think
Correct.
that's what I think that's what you were trying to remember. Data doesn't have feelings.
Yes.
I always it's always a mindset thing. Like when I approach a founder, and they're always, if you're a good founder, you're always going to be headstrong, or you're always going to be very passionate about the direction you're, especially if you're post revenue. So we can't take that
Yep.
away from founders. They know what they're doing. If you illustrate for them to use data in a different way for revenue, then they begin to lean into the conversation. And what makes a good RevOps or revenue leader is not that they can curate the data or clean the data or display it in it's what the insight that they draw. What action are we going to take from this data? And the
Yep.
perfect example is what we were discussing before in terms of product. If all you're doing with product data is using it to make better product, why aren't you building that product in the direction of revenue? That's what I would. What are you doing that's moving away from the direction of revenue? If you have a product department, a customer success department, they should all be growth facing. And if you unlock the data and the KPIs within those functional departments and join it and say, how can we use product insights for revenue growth? How can we use customer
Yep.
success insights for revenue growth? Heck, how can we use all the no's that our SDRs and AEs are getting for revenue growth? It becomes a very different conversation. And now the data that was like at the bottom of the spreadsheet, hidden somewhere else, now actually becomes quite relevant. And then they no longer
Yeah.
say my data's crap. It's like, oh, my data's worth $10 million ARR. Jonathan, let's unlock this thing. What do we need to do? Right?
Yeah. And it's like, I love that, right? Because it's like, how do you take, and I'm really curious on your perspective of this, right? How do you take a dashboard, right? And we always, like, when we talk about data and we look at data, we look at data in the sense of like business intelligence and visualization. Like, that's great. That's a narrative, right? That's that's the cover, but like, how do you make it actionable, right? How do you tell the story? How do you deliver the results? Like, how do you switch the way that data, not only becomes interpreted but applied, and really get people to apply their data in a, not only a holistic way, right? I look at, oh, my demand's down, this is my leading indicator, here's the business strategy, but like on a person by person level, and really use customer data at the one-to-one to say, how do I make Molly's experience better? How do I make Jonathan's experience better? And really drive that through.
Yeah, so I actually love that question because it is likely the number one question. Jonathan, what do you do? Do you do PR? Do you do marketing? Do you do sales? You do coaching? What do you do? And I'm just like, I don't know. If you know what I should be doing, then we don't need to have this conversation. You came to me because you would like to grow revenue. So
Yep.
I always empower those colleagues of mine that are in RevOps and revenue, drive the conversation and educate. Don't take on the
Yep.
assignment because that's who's going to be responsible for that bright idea.
Because then you own it, right?
Then you own it. You own the results, and then your
You
team is
own the
going
management,
to
the
suffer
maintenance,
everything.
everything.
And if you don't challenge with data a different direction, a better way of doing things, then you're going to fail before you started, right? So
Yep.
one of the first things that I do is I always go pie in the sky. What is your goal, right? And then we break
Yep.
that down by buyer stage. And I'm like, this is not the responsibility of your sales organization. Your entire organization should be facing revenue. So if we look at what the overall OKRs are for the year, break
Yep.
them down by quarter, let us think about the different ways that functions in your organization that were thought of as cost centers, operations, whatever. Let's orient them in the direction of revenue. For example, product releases, right? You have a product team, you're a founder, you sit with them. I need 16 releases and I need it done in this timeline. Okay, why? Oh, because, we got to continually improve the product. Why? Because we want to get more customers.
That's what that book that I read told me that I need.
Right. That book, that guru, that YouTube 16-year-old on a skateboard that's in front of a Maserati. He told me that this is what you got to do.
That's what Google did.
Right. That's what Google did. And it's like, okay, respectfully, no, all the way no. We cannot identify what the OKRs or the actions or the campaigns are unless we understand how they connect to that end goal. So rather than picking an arbitrary number, I need 16 product releases, how about we become proactive? Think about, okay, how are customers currently using the product? All right. Why are they here? How long are they staying? Why do they leave? What other problems are they looking to solve with us now that they're here? And build product in that problem solving direction. Because if we can get early adoption on a beta release or an upgrade or an upsell, right, with the current customer base, that's net new revenue, that's net new customer experience,
that's NDR.
Right. And then you take that data and you apply that all the way back to the top of the funnel awareness. We know our customers better now.
Yeah. And it's sentiment, right? So like, if I think about, my experience and, we talk about the way that I think about things is like, what do I expect, right? From a business, when the pharmacy is a great example. Like if I call the pharmacy, I expect them to know this stuff about me. I expect them to be anticipating, oh, I've got a refill coming up. I've got this, I've got that. We have this data. We just need to use it in a way that like actually shapes the customer experience. So when I think about like exactly to your point, like how do we delight our existing customers? Right? How do we take that? And like, if I'm working with a company and they're like, let's make this better for you. We hear you, we value you, we see this gap, we're listening, and that you make that investment, like you're likely making a customer for a long time, right? I can't commit to life, but like you're generally building a really strong sentiment for growth and for expansion. And you're proving a concept versus kind of pie in the sky of like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? Well, now you have your beta testers directly at your disposal.
That's right. And I like that concept as well, because likely when a founder at the stage, or sometimes it's just the marketing or growth leader, look for a solution and a partner like Successment, they have ideas about what's not working and they would like to unlock what is going to work. So,
Yeah.
I always tell them, you remember that silly thing that we all learned in school? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Well, putting higher quotas and putting more pressure and cracking the whip at your sales department is not going to get you better sales. You know what's going to happen? Even if you get a fantastic Accenture level AE on your team, your product is not selling, so pressuring them isn't going to make them a better salesperson. What's going to happen is you're
Yeah.
going to get toxic culture. You're going to lose a potentially rock star salesperson instead of supporting them. So let's look at the
There you go.
data that we weren't paying attention to before. The no's. That's
Yep.
qualitative data, right? Why are so many
Yeah.
people saying no? Why are the leads so poor quality? Why aren't they convert? If they convert, why are they turning over so quickly? What data
Yep.
can we use to answer these questions, improve our
And how do we
messaging
fix the
from the
process?
onset?
Yeah.
How do we fix the messaging from the onset so they see the value and have them travel through that buyer journey? Because as they travel through that buyer journey, there's always breadcrumbs of data. And
Right.
the superpower that startups have that others don't is that blue ocean versus red ocean concept, right?
Yep.
Your superpower is your proximity to your customers. If you're at a million or even
Hmm.
$10 million in revenue, when was the last time the CEO of Harley Davidson called you after you bought a motorcycle to ask you, how was your experience?
Right.
You know, but if you're at a startup, you can do that and you can get real life qualitative data and you can make that
Yep.
person a champion and a hero while at the same time improving your business. So that
And
qualitative
the
data, the data you're not looking at, is actually what you use to power the first $10 million.
And I think, the thing that I wish like every startup founder here would like listen to, right? Like because of the early stage that you're at, you're in such a better position to do things, right from the start, right? And it's not always going to be right, and it's going to evolve and it's going to change and it's going to grow. But what are the things that separate? One of the things that I see that separate, your 10 million to $100 million companies is how they use data.
That's
The
right.
companies that are growing have it defined. They have, governance, they have standards, they have a framework, right? And it's not to say like you have this rigidness that can't be interpreted, but they're speaking the same language, right? When I go into a C-suite, when I say customer, everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's defined, it's measurable, it's aligned, it's sourced. And that's where I think like coming in from a startup, right? You have the ability to do these things on the onset, defining the process. Like a lot of those kind of components that tend to get overlooked at the beginning when you're grabbing are so foundational as you look to scale. So how do you help really set your clients up for success, for scale, right? As they're, likely growing very quickly. And
Mhm.
operations, I laugh because like operations tends to sit backseat to growth a
That's right.
lot. And it's like, and I get it, right? Because you gotta grow before you can scale. But
That's
how
right.
do you get that kind of brought up further for your leaders and for your teams?
Right. So I have a saying. I always say, when in doubt, zoom out. You need to get out of your own way because, again,
It's really
let's go.
good. I like that.
When in doubt, zoom out. Let us go all the way back to the beginning, right? Let's go at, we're already in a relationship. Let's remember why we started this journey. You didn't know the answers. So now
Yeah.
that we're here working together, get out of your champion's way, your internal team and your external
Yeah.
partners assessment, and let us do what we know how to do for you and go solve founder problems. This is what we're here for. That's why it's called a
Yep.
company. It's a group of us. And if you are really defending your culture and your priorities, they go hand in hand seamlessly. And it goes along with one of the things that I started this conversation with very early, Molly. If you're starting at the tactical level because you read it in a magazine or you heard it on you have absolutely no idea how your customers are going to
Yep.
react to these changes. You know how perhaps the market may react. It's an educated guess, sure, but you don't know for
Yep.
sure. So why not slow down so you can grow fast and look at the data objectively from a high level and then zoom in to see where are the leaks, right? Because
Right.
another beautiful problem to have, founders love it. They don't see the issue. I do. But when you have a really powerful sales team and you are converting, baby, your MRR is hot like fire, but they don't stay. So how are you going to scale
Yep.
in that case, right? Can't put pressure on the
Right.
sales team. In that case,
They're
that data
the best
has to.
salesperson in the world, but if you have the crappiest product, you're just
That's right.
slinging mud, right?
Right.
Um,
So it all ladders up from all functional leadership and all stages of the buyer journey, where when you really zoom out and you see where's the revenue coming from and where's the revenue leaving, you can very quickly identify what's there using the data. What makes a really good RevOps or revenue growth leader is your ability to interpret that data and convert that into actions with measurable
Yep.
outcomes.
Yep. And, and I think that's the measurable outcomes, right? And like generally the things that I push on a lot too is like setting expectations and defining success, and success might be failure in some situations, and that's okay as long as you're identifying that you're going to fail fast, right? And the things that I think we put eggs in baskets, and that's my Midwest coming out of me, but like you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Figure out how you champion challenger, how you grow, how you use data, and like before you run these experimentations, like what are you trying to do, right? Okay, I'm trying to grow revenue. That's great, but like what we're doing is not going to grow revenue, right? It's what are we trying to move that then is going to result in growing revenue,
Goodness,
right? What is
that. I love how you put that together. One of the ways that we conceptualize that, and by the way, shout out to my Midwest office. They're really big supporters and they're all from here. So they're going to recognize that and beat me up later and say, look, we're out there. Anyway, one of the ways that we do that is always by defining what we call a parallel growth plan. And we think about a parallel growth plan at each buyer stage as a ladder, right? So we know what the founder and what the investors want. Revenue growth. Okay, let's assign that to a number. Cool. Now we have the number. Let's assign that to a timeline. Cool. Now we have the timeline. Now let's go to each functional leader within the organization, from the secretary all the way up into the CMO, and say, what can you do in your job to move these metrics up in the direction of revenue? And then we define what those KPIs are, map those to milestone OKRs, and those OKRs are designed to either unlock revenue or put you one step closer to revenue. That way, when you have check-ins on the overall growth of the startup, you don't always have to report on revenue, but you can report on, look how far we've come. This is how long we have to go, and we can measure it by using A, B, and C. And then it's an opportunity to challenge. Don't challenge me based on we're not growing too fast. What are you measuring us against? You can only measure us against ourselves, right? These are our capabilities. This is how we're using the team to leverage those capabilities. And this is what we're expecting in net new revenue growth. We can't measure in dollars and cents today because we have a lot of shit to get out of the way. But what we are measuring are A and C. Now, if you think that we're not moving in the direction of revenue, bring me the data and you challenge me. And
you can't measure what you don't track, right? And what you don't have defined. So let's make sure we've got it. And I was, for those on the call, successment.com, I think I got the website right. You've got a snack section that I love. .co. Sorry, I'll drop it in the chat so I don't mess it up. But I was creeping on the website, and there's some awesome like one pagers and some great resources out there. And like the one that you have is like the growth plan, right? And I think in looking at this, I was like, okay, you took something in this content, and whoever did your design and did your content, like props to them, because it's like you're taking something that like when you explain it, it makes sense, right? And then when you visualize it, you can apply it. So like as RevOps people, like there's not a lot of great resources out there that help to explain these concepts and how to think about these things and like how to build your plan. And so I'm geeking out because I was like, oh, this is like, this makes sense to me, right? And I can use this and I can explain this to somebody who maybe wouldn't get it. And so I'm very impressed with like quality content out there that like takes something that's so challenging and like that and like makes it digestible for consumption, as we think about, and you work with CEOs and other leaders, like they don't have time to sit and like want to sit and go through the minutia. They want outcomes, they want results, but like they also have to understand how to get there, right? And that's part of our job as revenue operations people is like, okay, great, yes, I hear you want this outcome, here are the 50 steps that go in to get there. They don't care about the 50 steps, but how do you get them the 5?
That's right.
And help them understand the 5 big things that have to get done, and let them know that like it's not a magic wand. I always joke and I'm like, I'm the dream maker, right? Revenue operations, we're the dream makers, we're the doers, we're that, but like we don't have the wand. We have, rolling up our sleeves and elbow grease.
I think that the I think that one of the challenges that revenue operations leader, and when I say revenue leaders, I kind of smush in together senior leadership that are traditionally referred to as sales, marketing, and growth leaders, right? To me, in my brain, that's
Yep.
a bucket. When I
Yeah, and I
think
typically
about,
throw in even customer success in that one from my
correct,
standpoint too.
I would agree. I would also agree.
Yeah.
I I think about a team that's typically under a lot of pressure, but they take a lot of orders. And I always say, go to hell. Empower yourself as a functional revenue leader. And you have to sit down and put your boundary up and say, I understand that you want to do that because you heard that that works. But you would not go to a foot doctor and tell him to take a look at your teeth, right? Let your
You
functional
might, you just might not get the outcome you want.
Right, right. Let your functional revenue leadership do what they do best. And what I
Yep.
find is that revenue leaders, marketing, sales, whatever, they are in such a pinch to defend their spends and defend their expertise that they will throw whatever metrics that the C-suite is going to identify. Oh, you want leads? Great. Let's just team. We need leads.
Leads.
When that team knows that's not going to lead to revenue, they just want leads. But you know what? This is going to buy us 6 months of them getting off of our back, because then their next question in 6 months is, oh my God, guys, great job generating leads. Why aren't they converting? Well, we can plan for that. We know. But when you set that expectation from the outset with what you
Yep.
described as our process, that's one of success and superpowers. That's what RevOps science is, and that's our intellectual property. It's let us break this down. You're a CEO. You don't want to look at Google Analytics and go through an explanation of how we got. No, I don't care. Do we make money? Yes or no?
You
And
might
if
want
no,
to, but you shouldn't, right? And
and
that's
not every
yeah,
time.
back to like,
Not every
are
time.
you a founder or a leader, right?
That's right. That's
So
right. When you get there and the answer is no, we didn't generate leads, their question is going to be, why? Well, let me show you why. This is the data that we're actually monitoring that matters. You guys over there are looking at leads. We're looking at time spent on page, demand generation,
yeah,
comments. These might not be huge, sexy numbers and metrics, but they have a higher buyer intent. These are folks that
yep,
might not have budget today, but in 3 months, it's not going to be a 3 month sales cycle. They're going to come. They know who we are. They're educated. They like us, and they're ready to buy. What's more valuable, 100 leads or one qualified lead that comes inbound that says, I've been following you guys for 6 months, haven't filled out a single form, but I'm ready to buy today. My check's ready. Which one are we after, right? What's the outcome that we're after?
yep, absolutely. And like, obviously these are fun conversations that you're getting to have, and thinking about boiling the ocean. Like, if you could give like three pieces of advice to a CEO, like, of what you're going to go in, and like what's the most important thing as like a CEO that you should consider, as you look at the scale, like what are the three things, right?
The three
If I
things?
put
Okay.
my time, energy, and effort into this kind of concept, this is what I'd pick.
Okay. So with RevOps science, the three tenets which you're asking for are called process, performance, and progress, right? As a CEO,
Love
I've
that.
never met one, unless something's really wrong, a CEO does not want to go into details with you. They just want to know where the number's moving. And that's exactly where you should position them so that they feel comfortable with you, right? Once you do that, you get to be really creative as a revenue leader about what you want to do, but you have to make them comfortable with you. And that means they want to feel transparency at a high level in headlines, not paragraphs, right? So
Right.
process is, what are you actually doing? And what stage of the game are you in? Timeline wise, I'm just thinking about a
Yep.
Gantt chart. How far away are we from revenue according to your forecast? Because I can hold you accountable
Yep.
to that. So if we agree on 12 months, don't bother me at 8 months. I'm busy. Don't ask me for revenue at
Yep.
8 months because I told you 12 and we both agreed to that, right? Process.
Yep.
Performance is, okay, if we cannot measure revenue today, Jonathan, and you just dropped a bombshell, like, we're not measuring leads, WTF, what in the world are we going to measure? These things. These are the things that we're going to measure from each department. And we're going to agree from now that this is how they're going to grow over time. These are my forecasts. So I don't want you to bother
Yep.
me. One of these forecasts are off, right? We're not going to be
Yep.
focused on leads until month 6. Why? Because we need to develop demand. Why? We haven't narrowed in on messaging. Why else? We don't know what the channel that our buyers are in. What else? We don't know what they're buying up to. What else? We're selling on product instead of solution. So don't talk to me about leads Because what leads are going to do is they're going to cause a kerfuffle within our organization. They're going to tie up our sales leaders when our sales leaders need to be closing. So this is the plan.
Yeah.
That's performance. These are the metrics that we're monitoring. And we're only going to stop monitoring those metrics when we unlock an OKR. And that OKR is going to bring us closer to revenue. The third piece is
and then
progress.
I'm like laughing. I'm like, that's so, it's so simple, right? And it makes so much sense, but like, I don't think people generally think this way. And that's what our jobs are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel as though it is because when you are generally growing as a revenue leader, I mean, let's face it, we're typically A-type personalities. We are passionate. Yeah. We are, we really stomp. We don't tiptoe.
Problem solvers.
Problem solvers. We're smart, but are we always super data analytical? Do we know how to tell a story through data? Not likely our strong point. That's where RevOps comes in. So when you lead with data and expectations at the high level, for those of you in revenue that are 2 or 3 degrees left or right of marketing, think about marketing. Go to your marketing leader, champion, mentor, whomever, and say, okay, I got this data. This is what I want to put. Help me put this into a sentence. That's a marketer superpower. Help me sell this thing. I need to explain this succinctly and use data, right? So then you draw from your RevOps people. What is the data that matters? Don't give me the little stuff. You and me can talk about that, but not for the C-suite, right? Cool. Here's my data set. Then you go to marketing. Okay, how do I tell that? Because you and I understand this story. How do I put this together the way that a CEO or that an advisory committee will, or an investor, the VC behind the startup is going to, they will partner with you. And then you put it in front of them. And then when they challenge you, you say, yes. And that is so interesting. This is the data that I have. What data do you have? And you will see that executive chill out. Because if they don't have data, you can easily, kind of gently in the kind of professional way, like you're basically being really passionate with absolutely no data behind you. You're telling me about a story you read times. You don't even know how this applies to our operation.
Yeah. And it's, and a lot of this is like experience is important, right? And experience can help drive strategy and, but you also have to have something that you can measure and gauge against, right? And like, I like, the saying like fuzzy data still shows trends, right? And I think that's still true. But like, you've got to have something you can pin back to have that confidence in. And, you can make decisions without data. Everyone starts somewhere where they don't necessarily have everything they need. But again, to your point, it's like how you build a data centric and a data focused and I don't want to say data first because I want every business to be customer first.
Customer first, that's right.
But build a data mindset. Culture becomes so important, especially like as you talk about things and as you remove interpretation and you think about being good stewards of resources and budget and outcomes. Like you've got to have that level of rigor and management behind this. When you think about, this question comes up consistently on these conversations, like I'm a startup, I'm a CEO, I, know that I have these needs. I'm getting out of founder-led sales. I'm stopping running my CRM. I've got, let's call it, $1 million in ARR, like very still early stage. Like when do I invest in RevOps? Like when do I actually bring a person in or what type of person do I bring in? Or like, what does that look like? Like, how do you think about like that resourcing strategy?
Sure. I believe that the right time to bring in someone to support and boost revenue growth is right around the $1 million mark. That's where at the $1 million mark, you have strategy that typically, you've gone like, 18 exits away from that strategy. That strategy flew off the shelf. You're moving in place. You're getting done what you need to get done. And you got to $1 million. Have you codified it? Have you codified that yet? Probably not.
Yeah.
At $1 million, and founders usually recoil at this, but you really have to slow down so you can grow fast. This is the time where you should celebrate your win and temper your passion for growth with longevity. Because if you continue crashing and burning and going balls to walls the way that you've been doing from $1 to $1 million, your team isn't going to scale with you. You're always going to be working in the business. Basically, you bought a job. That's not what you came into startup to do. No, you did.
Right.
So at this point, this is where you slow down, and this is how success one always starts. Let us do a listening tour. I want to listen to what's been working because I don't want my founders, our startup partners, to go to the left or the right of what they know works for them and try this other thing over there on a risk and then be very disappointed with the outcome. Let me listen to what you have been doing. Let me
Yep.
compare that to the data. Let me listen to your customers. Now I have the three core tenets of great RevOps. Qualitative data. Why are the people saying no to my salespeople? Why do the customers love us, right?
Yep.
Quantitative data. How are people coming into our system? How are people using product? And I have market analysis. How's everybody else doing this crap, right? And are we
Yep.
outperforming them? With those three kind of core units of data, you can now present a strategy. And as a RevOps leader, this is the only time where I'll say it for us people here. This is where you shut up because you have to listen. You have to make sure that they're comfortable and they understand what it is that you're proposing to move forward and that they understand your measurements. It's critical
Yep.
because in the revenue growth journey, there are going to be ups and downs, right?
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
downs, you want to remain agile and you want to bring up that. Remember when we discussed this? This is where we're supposed to be, remember? Because
Yeah.
the next step is
Yep.
that. And that always tempers them, builds your trust, and it builds a moat of social capital and expertise between you and the organization that you're working, whether you're outsourced or in. As
Sets expectations, right? Like,
as long as they know what's going to happen, they're fine, you know. But when they don't know or something unexpected comes up, that's when you need to be agile.
yeah, no, I love that. And I think that that's great. And again, back to it's like it's setting the expectations. It's aligning the business to the needs. It's, there's a great book called Predictable Success that talks about just the ebbs and flows of a
That's
startup
right.
journey and like how you understand like when you're going to whitewater and when you're on the treadmill and like on these different pieces of the journey and how you then you build that support. No, this is great. I want to take a few minutes. Like, what topics do you want to talk about? I try to save some time. Are there things that you think you are passionate about and want to inform the audience on? As you think
Um,
about the future of RevOps that I haven't asked. I've been drilling you with questions for the last 40 minutes, so I feel like that's
no. I've enjoyed the questions very much. I believe that um, as revenue, two things I believe very strong in, that revenue growth and customer data should always lead the way. And that
yeah,
needs to be very carefully navigated against the passion and the product focused founder because they're only going to leverage what they know works in their very personal experience and what they've heard or observed in the market from their peers. They don't, it is not always obvious to them that the real unlocking of revenue happens with the data that you already have that you're not paying attention, the unsexy stuff, bounce rate
yep,
and time on page. No, this stuff matters. Let me explain to you. When you unlock those things for the founder, it just builds, again, the first P of RevOps science, process. Where are we
yep,
exactly where we're supposed to be, right? If this is a scary spot, are we accounted for? How long are we going to be here? And what's the next step? What is the light? When is the light going to turn back on? As long as you navigate that for them, it makes them very, very comfortable. So I believe that having a simple process wins. And what really makes me cringe, what really grinds my gears, is all of these gurus and content creators that they have these demonic spreadsheets that have 1,800 metrics trying to prove to you that they know what they don't care. People
yep,
care about your outcomes. That's it. They care about
yep,
your outcomes and the people who can speak to those outcomes. I don't care how many models you send me. I don't care how wonderfully you organize the data. What are you doing with the data?
yeah,
That's it. I don't care what you're doing. I just want to know that my outcome. Keep it that simple for your founder and for your whomever your stakeholder is that you're reporting to, and you will build a relationship where you can now lead from a place of power and a place of expertise rather than always chasing down the next 10 more blogs,
I know.
4 more
It's
SDRs.
like if it takes you
Right.
more time
Like
to gather the data and manage the data and interpret the data than use the data, you've got the wrong approach.
that's right. That really grinds me because I hear all these acronyms and special words and these people, maybe it's just my communication style. I'm from New York. I'm very straightforward. people sometimes they speak to me in acronyms during my interviews and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not bright enough to know what that means. But if you explain it in simple terms, I can tell you how we can use it, and it disarms
Right.
people, right? From there, it's really about being very intentional about the metrics that you're reporting. And you have to build respect with your stakeholder by taking ownership of your superpower and telling them when they're wrong. And the way that you do that is
Yep.
by saying, okay, you want this outcome, and then you're telling me how to do it, and then you're telling me how to measure it. What's going to end up happening, and I use leads because leads is the easiest. So what you're telling me is you don't want me to sit down with my team and focus on how we're going to build net new revenue. You've already magically figured that out, and you say lead volume is what you're going to measure success. You're wrong. Let me explain to you why, and let me explain to you a better way, and allow us to disagree with each other and meet in the middle because we're both on the same side. We both want the same thing. And that's
Yeah.
how conversations start, right? That's how you really take
Yep.
it. But then, at the end of the day, you got to produce results because if you don't, you're going to be But
Right. Yeah.
when you're concentrating on what you know how to do, if you put it that way and you challenge and things come out the right way, you're a superstar. And that's where more revenue leaders need to play instead of working nervous, taking orders, and focusing on metrics that don't really matter, right?
Yep.
The third piece
Yeah.
for
And
me,
oh yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say the third piece for me that's really important to remember is how are you measuring progress, right?
Yep.
Don't always focus on the big pie. Some metrics you set on the clock, others you set on the calendar. These clock metrics are laddering up to the calendar metrics. The calendar
Oh,
metrics
I
are
love
laddering
that.
up, right? So when you again,
Yeah.
Brian, you love it because it's so simple. Don't overcomplicate revenue. It's our job. That's why we're in this industry. It's complicated as shit. Making it sounds more complicated for the founders of the startup doesn't win us any points. It just makes us sound
I know.
complicated.
I need like Jonathan antidotes is what I need right now. Is like clock versus calendar metrics. Like, I mean, that's the stuff that like that starts to resonate when you say things to people, right? God, that was good. And like when we talk about the metrics, right? You talk about the spreadsheets. I'm like, pick 5. Like, actually, I want you to pick 3, but I'll be generous and give you 5. Let's do those really well and align on those and use those and then build from there. Like, because if I don't have those 5 right, anything I do beyond that is wrong.
That's right. Exactly. This is why, for me, RevOps science, which we've developed at Successum, it is mapped to the 5 simple buyer stages. These 5
Yeah.
simple buyer stages will unlock revenue if we set what those metrics are going to be from the beginning instead of just picking stuff. Okay, sales is going to be
Yep.
in charge of new revenue. Product is going to be in charge of how many customer outcomes we got. Customer success is strictly retention, and then awareness is strictly lead gen. No. Why? Where did we arrive at that? What strategy and thinking went behind that? Let us partner. Let us partner as your revenue leader and you, the leader of the organization, CEO, right? And then let us also tap in on the creativity of the humans who are in charge of those functional pillars, right? If you're doing
Yep.
brands, talk to me about what metrics matter, brand manager. I want to know your input because I have to communicate that up to the CEO or the founder or the investor, the VC firm, and make that make sense. We need to put it in the direction of revenue. Same thing with operations. Earlier, Molly, you mentioned something offhand. It was something along the lines of, operations is, in the background. Think about how much
Yeah.
buy-in you're going to get from your IT and operations folks. If you tell them, you know what, I need to bring you all the way over here to this
You're
table.
right.
Revenue.
Yeah.
How are we producing revenue from operations, right? I don't want to talk about cost savings. I'm talking about net new. What are we doing?
Right.
And when you put those leaders in charge of answering those creative questions, you will see them so enabled and empowered and so intelligent about their intentionality within their functional departments that it's impossible not to get to $10 million plus.
Yeah, because they're bought in. They feel valued. I met with the CEO earlier in my career, right? And I was probably in my early 20s, and he's like, "What can I do to help improve the business?" I was like, "Oh, well, thank you for asking me that." And he's like, "I know you're the one. You're doing the day-to-day work, right? You're the one who sees the problems. Like, what would you do to fix it?" Right. And like that's the type of feedback you need. Well, I see that I spend X, Y, and Z time on this mundane task that takes me 5 hours a week, right? what could I use that 5 hours for if we did this? And like, what are the investments that we could make? Or, what are the points of friction I see and handoffs and in ownership? And that it's like, again, that feedback is so critical. And like, we just assume things are good because we see results, but it's like, I always joke, I'm like, if something's good, it's probably crap because I could always be doing it better.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
if you're setting your goals, you likely don't have the right goals.
That's
Like if you're hitting goals, you don't have the
I
right
love,
goals. So like, how do you push
love,
yourself? And
I love,
pushing your operations forward too, I think is just so important.
I love that. I think that I am confident that revenue leaders do not use their superpowers to leverage and defend their decisions often enough to create more of an impact. And
Yeah.
for that reason, I see so many agencies, boo, agencies, don't like those. But I see so many agencies selling on very tactical things. And I love this when someone approaches me, Jonathan, what do you do? I need SEO. Can you do that for me? And I'm like, no, but can you tell me why you're asking for SEO? Oh, because of this, because of that, because of
Can I do it? Yes, I can. Should I do it?
that.
Let's talk.
But is it in your best interest to do so?
Yeah.
Because what happens with the revenue leaders who are not operating from a place of integrity is they're going to listen carefully and they're going to map whatever your problem is to their functional thing. Oh, yeah, that shuffles card thing, SEO. That's it. Guys, we do SEO. That's it. It's not like they're going to say, you know what, you don't need SEO. Let me put you on the phone with another revenue leader who does paid ads, because that's really what I feel is going to move them. They're not going to do that. So when we lead by listening to understand and problem solving creatively and really putting all of our resources in front of this thing that we now need to measure and walk through that stakeholder, that's when you build the relationships. And as an industry, that's how we grow in our authority.
Right. And so, I mean, exactly. And so I think, we should empower RevOps, right? And also empower leadership to like, not just have your peer-to-peer conversations and your peer to direct reports, like do that 360, go down a few levels, like really get the right buy-in from the people who are ultimately building your business. Not only is it good for your understanding, good for your like customers, right? Because they're your front line, but also good for morale, good for people to feel bought in and feel, engaged in the process.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the reasons why I like to play between the $1 million and $10 million ARR range is because I recognize where my superpower. Can I take you from 10 to 50? Maybe. Have I done it before? No. I don't know how they do revenue growth at Google and Boeing and JetBlue and NASA. That's not my game, right? But if
Right.
you are a startup and you're relatively small, one of your superpowers by default is your agility. One of the things that ticks me off is when I have a brilliant founder from like an Accenture or a Deloitte or a NASA, and they're like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And then they try to navigate their startup as if it was this big enterprise. Like, what do you mean you need an assistant to book your meetings? Like, there's people sitting right next to you. There's a group of 3. Like, book your own meetings, build a relationship with your end customer, and just get it done. Same thing can be said of revenue growth and revenue operations, right? There's only but so many people on the team. It doesn't take that long to sit there, get buy-in, boost morale, and enable people to work harder and smarter for you. You don't know everything. Let people fail.
Right.
But before they fail, trust them, because that's the reason why you hired them or partnered with them in the first place.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Any other kind of last minute tips, tricks, like the one thing, if you had parting knowledge of like one thing I want to share with the group, what would it be?
I would say,
I hope it's like a like antidote, or like clocks and calendars might have changed my life. Like I'm probably like that is gonna be day-to-day jargon for me. So
I would say that's actually parallel growth plan. If you're on the snacks page on the success website, that's what parallel growth plan is. I would say just really, guys, please keep it simple. Don't go and give more information that is, keep it succinct and allow your stakeholder to lead with curiosity and respond with data. If you can remember that framework as a revenue growth leader, you will be very successful. If you lean on arbitrary metrics just because they understand them or because they're telling you what you need to do, you will never become a leader. You'll become a revenue resource. Sure, I can always
Right.
tap on this person. They know how to do SEO. That person knows how to audit HubSpot. Great. But will you lead? Will you get the social capital needed to be a true revenue leader? No. So
Nope.
lead with curiosity, respond with data, keep it simple.
I love that. And I put that in the chat. Like, lead with curiosity, respond with data. I think it just I might need to like tattoo that on my forehead some days too, right? Because I think, again, back to like, we I think you do one or the other. You can do one or the other intuitively, but how do you bring them together purposely? And I think that that's so impactful to be able to do and really tell the story. I always think about the data Lego analogy. Here's
That's
data,
right.
here's it sorted, here's it's in the picture, kind of thing, and how we tie that all together. So no, this was great, Jonathan. I appreciate your time here today. Thank you for joining. I am, these are always fun conversations because I feel like selfishly like I learn a whole lot, just picking brains from other operations and other growth leaders. So really appreciate the time. And for anyone on the call, like, put link to the website. There's some, while we were talking, I was scrolling through a lot of the resources out there. There's some really good visuals out there that are so nicely done that I think, like, we struggle with this as ops professionals. Like, there is no like playbook to RevOps. People think about it, but how do you take something so complicated and disseminate it in a way that people can understand and interpret, and in that simplified, taking complex problem, making it simple. So really appreciate the work your team's doing to just help build this out. And yeah, connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn. I'm sure he's more than willing to do that. I should have probably dropped your profile in. I'm hoping that like he's got some like weekly nuggets out here of like, I don't even know what to call it. Is it Rev,
so,
I
so
was
a
like
couple
RevOps nuggets, snacks.
so a couple of different things. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the most conversational person that I can, because what we do is science. So RevOps science is all about the simplification of what we do. So it's funny that Molly said there's no playbooks for RevOps. I would challenge that. I believe that what we've developed
Yeah.
over at Successment RevOps science is that playbook, and those playbooks are all ungated.
Yeah.
So if you want,
I should probably say textbook. There's not a textbook. There's playbooks, but there's not
yeah,
the rule set, right? There's the guiding
right.
principles. So I think that's
There we
probably a
go.
fair challenge.
There
I
we go.
concede.
There we go. If you take a look at the snacks section, it's literally good marketing and RevOps put into practice. Ungate the shit. What am I going to gain if the folks from this audience go there and they download a snack and I start marketing the hell out of them? All they're going to do is get annoyed. They're just trying to learn and see. Does Jonathan even know what the hell he's talking about? That crazy guy with all the chains and the Versace hat. Let me go see if he knows his stuff. Then go discover that. And then 3, 6 months from now, a year from now, you're going to be that flaming, evangelist. And you're going to say, no, I want Jonathan, right? Do the same thing for your business. Do the same thing for your revenue operation.
Right.
And I'm the most conversational person in the world. You hit me up, I will respond. I don't have anybody in my DMs. Managing them, in other words. Happy to connect.
I was like, you want to manage mine? No, I'm just kidding. No, I really appreciate the time today. This was fun. And, hopefully this is such a great community. Again, back to the point, I've not had one person come on here who says, don't reach out to me. Don't ask me for advice. Like, right. I don't want to talk to you, right? Like, we want this to be best in class. We want to build great talent. We want to help support businesses. Like, we want to use our experience, like, lean into this. This is what I love about the RevGenius community, and the fact that they trust me enough an hour every week to talk to people unprompted, unscripted. You guys have no idea what you're getting into. So really, thank you so much for the time, and have a good Wednesday, everyone.
Same to you, Molly. It's been fun.
Take care. Bye.
Bye now.